Hello, this is Druidsfire, and I am coming at you with yet another video of a game I checked out at PAX East 2023 at the Boston Convention Center in March. The first game I actually took a look at was Feudal Lands. This is a medieval survival PvP or PvE game. Basically, if you've played games like Conan Exiles or Ark or Atlas, something like that, where you have a world is out to get you and you have to survive in some fashion. Feudal Lands is made by Serfworks. It is currently not yet available. It is a game you can wish list on Steam. And they are going to be doing a Kickstarter here in April 2023 to add more goodies to the game. So at the event, I spoke to Chris Morris, who is one of the level designers from Serfworks, and we actually talked a lot more than I didn't actually get any hands-on with the game itself. It was strictly a discussion about what the game was going to be like, how is it different than other games, what their vision was, and stuff of that nature. Basically, Chris is a long-time survival MMO player. He mentioned a whole bunch of games that he had played previously, such as Ark, Conan. He even checked out some Age of Empires stuff over the years. He says that his experience, he's been on the wrong end of a Zerg. He's also led a 300-plus player community, and he considers the last 2 years the best gaming experience of his life, working on Feudal Lands. And really what his personal goal apparently, and the goal of this particular team was they wanted to rebuild a survival MMO that had a gaming community behind it. And they also wanted to see about, doing things a little bit differently than some other games, because they keep seeing some of the same mechanics, some of the features over and over again. They wanted to do something a little bit new. So this particular game is currently set in a medieval-esque setting. No futuristic things like the tech armor stuff that you'd find in Ark, for example. There's going to be animal taming as part of the design, as well as, big base building options. Things they want to do include the use of Greek fire, which is a historical weapon from back in the day. Do Google it if you want to see how cool it is. Pun not intended, because it is, of course, fire. They're looking at the possibility of doing ship-to-ship battles, boarding somebody else's ship in melee combat, and not really pirates, because that's way too modern, but the whole notion of freebooters and whatnot going to each other's ship and having at it sounds like a lot of fun. The game is in pre-alpha, and so they still need a lot more dev time. They are currently looking at 2 years into the cycle so far. He didn't really have an estimate as to when they expect to do like a full and proper launch. The game has apparently 10 people on the dev team at this time, and they are building in Unreal 5. So the one thing that I really want to know is, whenever you're making a game similar to other kinds of games in the same genre, I always want to know, what are you doing that's unique to this particular game? And Mr. Morris had to say that the unique thing they're doing with Feudal Lands is giving players the ability to have a life outside the game, which I found very fascinating, because I know there's like a lot of games that are like, we want you to spend 15-20 hours in our game on a daily basis, and you must play the game all day long in order to... They don't want to do that. They want players to be able to, have a life, apparently. I did ask him whether the game would have the ability to mod, if the modding community could have a go at it, and he said for right now they're not really... It didn't seem like they were too keen on that notion, simply because he felt that, hackers would get into the game and start making a mess of things, and, it would just be all kinds of wackiness. That's also one of the reasons why, later on in our discussion, he said that they weren't really hugely interested in doing, say, player-owned servers. And it sounded like, based on what the overall concept was player-owned servers really wouldn't work very well with their system and what they're planning on doing. He did say this game is intended for both the sweaties and the casuals. So, for example, the folks who do want to know-life the game and, really go hardcore on it, they'll have an opportunity. And then the casual folks who may just be more interested in things like animal taming or exploring the world or base building, they'll have a place for that as well. One of the features of the game is apparently no one will be able to raid your base while you are offline. So it's none of these things where you wake up the next day, check out your stuff, and find out it is gone. So that's kind of cool. I always worried about that when I was playing other survival games on, even on, on the ARC servers I personally played on in the past, it was always a case where the server rules were it wasn't a proper PvP environment. You're just there to hang out and have fun and tame things and build stuff and, role play actually, play characters and tell stories that way. However, with this particular game, speaking of ARC, the building system apparently is very similar to ARC according to Chris's description. He said the system is modular and based on the notion of Lego, being able to build whatever you want without crashing your system, which is always really good. And he said that people were able to get over 60, their dev team was able to get over 60 FPS on ultra graphics, so that's very promising. I think they were working it on the Steam Deck. I did ask what platforms will this game be launching on eventually. It'll be launching into early access on the PlayStation 5, the Steam Deck, and the Xbox. Sorry for your luck if you're on Nintendo Switch or anything like that. He did actually mention that the CEO of Serfworks is a gentleman by the name of David. Came from Xbox, had a 10-year tenure at Xbox, and was bringing that experience to the Serfworks team. All right, going back to the game itself. So the average day in this game apparently could include either PvP or PvE. Those are apparently options. We didn't really get into the method of how you could be only PvE or how you could only be PvP, whether you had to turn on some sort of flag to prevent it, or to prevent PvP, or how that was going to work. It seems such it very much seems like very early days on it. One of the things I was noticing over our discussion is, as I was mentioning some things that I'm used to in other games, in terms of character customization or whatever, and he said, this was a very good idea, which means it's not something that they had already planned for or had really discussed amongst the team. So that was very fascinating to see just how early days, what we actually meant by early days. Now, the game itself is deliberately set in medieval times, so you're not going to get any modern, you're not going to get muskets or anything more modern in terms of, weapons or, no technological things, again, no tech stuff like in ARC. One of the things I will note, I'm going to flail my Bachelor of Arts in History at you for just a few moments. Even though it says it was deliberately set in medieval times, as you can see in these screenshots, they're not exactly historically accurate for any specific time frame. These Viking-style longhouses with the Tudor-style building, the geometry wasn't that precise back in the day, I'm just saying. So, again, not too historically accurate, but in terms of keeping it more realistically grounded, definitely fills that particular thing. So it's not like you're going to see, floating rocks or, unicorns floating around the landscape or something like that. The landscape, by the way, is going to be procedurally generated. That came up frequently in our discussion. And one of the things he seemed to be cool with is that by doing so, you're not really going to have YouTube videos about the 10 base locations that are always taken on other game servers, which I kind of snickered at because I remember watching such a video about one of the ARC. So it was like, where's the best place to build on this? And it's like, well, I actually managed to get one of them. That's pretty cool. However, for this game, you're not going to be able to do that because The landscape is procedurally generated, and which also leads me to believe that they're not really going to be able to do custom servers per se, at least not custom servers that you can traverse to other servers, because apparently that's something that they're going to be working on with their official servers, is where you may not even be aware that you're switching to a different server. Kind of reminds me of the shimmer in Atlas, except without the shimmer. It's like, you're suddenly in a different server. So that would make me wonder if they would be doing some sort of whitelisting options where, well, whitelisted players can go here, but non-whitelisted players cannot go there, which was good and bad when I witnessed that sort of behavior and mechanic in Atlas. So we'll see how that goes. The game will include NPCs that will help fill out the world and give it a sense of community, even for solo players, which I thought was very fascinating. So the NPCs are not like controllable pets or hirelings to direct against enemies. But again, this was one of those things that felt like they were discussing the game in very early stages. He said that they would be adding more AI elements to give them directions, to taking feedback from the community as to what the community feels that they want to add. One of the other things that he felt was very important was the community interaction. They do have a Discord that you can join that they are in, and directly communicating with the players, getting feedback and ideas almost in real time. One of the things, I mean, as a player, to me, it's really fascinating to be able to help guide or influence the development of a game. But on the other hand, I kind of do want to, let game devs do their jobs. So one of the things I'm always concerned about in such a setting is to ensure that the players themselves are not being taken advantage of in this regard, in that, the developers don't use the free labor of their player base to help build the game. I mean, taking ideas and getting feedback is all well and good, but it really depends on how deep that interaction is going to go. One of the things we discussed briefly was crafting, and he said that they're still working on the crafting UI. They want to add search bars and the ability to find items easily rather than scrolling through a big, long, honking list of items and to find the matching picture. We did mention, we discussed character generation, and he said that he did want to avoid some of the pitfalls of other games' character customizations, such as the whole body size thing the Ark did a while ago, where the characters had very long arms and very small hands and looked very strange. However, it's early enough that they can discuss things like custom hair options, and I brought up the idea of maybe using sliders to allow for non-binary appearances, and he seemed to say, well, that's definitely something that they could think about or discuss, but obviously it's not something they've committed to doing at this point in time. He did mention that in terms of armor, both men and women, so we're going back to the binary here, will have full coverage options, and he said the ladies, he said that the ladies he spoke to wanted to be badass as well as the dudes and have cool armor sets as well. So it does appear that this game will not be featuring the chainmail bikini that is so infamous in many other places. There may be those options, but hopefully if there are, it goes both ways. Like the door on top of 55 Central Park West in Ghostbusters. Anyhow. He did say that while there aren't full-on fantasy elements like magic, there are monster characters that you can fight, such as spiders and even dragons. But here's what I found very fascinating. He said that they were more influenced by the drunken tavern tale than any specific fantasy setting. So these monster characters will be mostly in dungeon spaces with, your regular deer, your bears, your whatever out in the open, in the landscape. So I really like that little bit of lore knowledge here, that instead of saying, oh, we're going to put unicorns in our game, you're going to come up, if there is such a creature in the game, it's because, again, influenced by, some dude drinking in the tavern and saying, oh, I saw a mermaid. And it's like, where did you see this? What was this? And it's probably not going to be, like the Disney version of a mermaid, as it were. So we also discussed like how big is this game map? As he mentioned, because they're using procedurally generated maps, it allows them to make the maps bigger than we'd normally expect. And again, they would actually be able to allow people to travel between servers, but in a way that is seamless. So it won't be like the shimmer that I'm used to seeing in Atlas, which is very interesting. He said he couldn't really go into detail about it, but he expected the game to be on a very large scale overall, bigger than we've seen in previous games. Again, we had mentioned the notion of unofficial servers, but again, they were really concerned about possibly that hackers could get a hold of various source codes and, make a bit of a mess on it. So they're just focusing on the official servers for now. He reiterated that they wanted to focus on their core experiences first and not add every single option that you find in all these other games into this game at the beginning. They didn't want to front load everything. He said that they'd rather build from their basic core to start with, but he added that there was the passion and the talent there on their team that he himself loved getting up to go to work and go into his office and just, have at it. Now we got into a little bit of the nitty gritty about some of the siege engines that were visible in the trailer, and that you can look at that trailer on Steam as well, and you can go wishlist the game there if you like. The game has siege engines like trebuchets, which can currently only fire in one specific direction, but they're looking at adding like a cogwheel to the bottom of it, or an option to direct where you can aim, with a ghost arc to tell you where the missile's going to land. And right now he said that you can launch yourself in the catapults as well. He's also trying to convince the dev team to allow biological warfare. For example, plopping a dead enemy corpse into your trebuchet and flinging it into the enemy base. And that corpse is going to suddenly spread disease all over. The herbalists there will have to figure out a way to deal with that. Their other siege engines include battering rams and siege towers and ballistas. Now, we also discussed what kind of biomes they have in the game. Right now, as you can see in the trailer, they have forested lands. But as you can kind of see in some of these screenshots, they look like, a little bit of fjord going on there. Possibly a little bit of snowscape, the snowy cape and whatnot. So it looks like right now they're looking at starting with the core of a forested landscape. In the interview, I said it kind of looked like somebody was in the middle of Germany in the medieval times, and that's because it was very heavily forested. There were mountains all over the place, and it looked like somebody should be dancing around Lederhosen or something. The experience will vary based on the procedurally generated maps. What they are looking at is in the future with DLC content, adding like a desert biome, typically one set primarily in like Crusader times, which was, of course, the Crusades went to the Middle East, and a lot of the Middle East is kind of desert-like. So desert, oasis, craggy mountains, that kind of dealio. And he said they really wanted to finish the base game first before adding new biomes via DLC. But desert and snowy was looking, snowy mountains were looking at some of the future plans down the road. As I mentioned earlier, they are going to be doing a Kickstarter here, which will possibly include the ability to design an armor set as one of the rewards. Again, that's one of the things where I'm personally kind of like, well, you're going to let somebody pay you to design something for you when you've got devs who can do that. It's like, well, you kind of should be paying them for their work, but if it's the person is okay with doing it, I suppose it's okay. The game itself will have eating and drinking mechanics, but he did say that they didn't want it to take over your gameplay. They're still testing it internally to find a good balance. What he said is they didn't want to mimic real life and have to, spend time gaming, the game, to sort out what their vitamin levels are or anything like that. We discussed what sort of weapons were available in the game, and he mentioned long swords, short swords, shields, longbows, and spears. They're also working on maces. Magic and, the spell casting abilities are not yet in the game. Again, it's something where they wanted to work on their core experience first. And he also stressed that they didn't want to make their melee combat obsolete, which, of course, magic users have the bad habit of doing. They want to keep that primitive feel to it rather than make it completely fantastic. fantastical, I should say. I asked him what sort of farming gameplay loop was existed in the game. He said it's not yet implemented, but it will be coming. They were mainly focusing on combat and the combat gameplay loops for the PAX East demonstration. I asked him what sort of cosmetic building options are there. Chris himself apparently is a base builder by trade, and he loved playing games like Valheim, and he wanted to he discussed the notion of giving specific items for like leaderboard situations, like activities, like the best person to kill all the bears on the server that he mentioned specifically. Maybe that person would get a housing decoration that only that person could make. Banners or flags for certain accomplishments. And it's so far it sounds like they're just kicking around ideas of how they want to address that. But it looks like the game is going to have plenty of options to to decorate and to use the various building materials to come up with your own designs rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to build this rectangular house and do this and whatever. One of the final things that we mentioned in the interview is I was looking at, some of the fire, because, being Druidsfire, I kind of like fire options in games. And he said that they could have gone to the Unreal Marketplace to get certain FX assets, such as fires or waterfalls, which, of course, any game can have me at waterfalls. I love water effects in video games. But anyhow, they said they did them custom themselves rather than going to Unreal Marketplace because they wanted to optimize them properly for the game itself to avoid performance hits, which, to me, I find that quite interesting that they did them themselves, and also we're doing it with the idea of preventing it from impacting a player's experience, which is really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the fires work and what their waterfalls look like when the game actually goes into early access and can be played. So that's pretty much what I had from the interview. You can go to feudallands.com and go over the game itself. Pardon me. There's a lot of there's a listing about their Kickstarter. That's a link to it. There's some screenshots, including the ones you see here. Also, there are mechanics talking about things you can do while you're building, how you survive the game, various options for the siege warfare, the crafting system, and how you control your territory on the PvP sections, and also the massive server system that we discussed earlier. So they're going to do 2 main servers, one for PvE and one for PvP, to accommodate different lifestyles. And yeah, infinite character progression. I found that was a very fascinating concept where there's no level cap. There's no skill cap. There's no limit to the number of skills you can acquire. So you can indeed get it all over time. So I found that very fascinating. So that's pretty much it. Again, go to feudallands.com to learn more about this game, and you can also select Notify Me when the Kickstarter goes live, which will be sometime here in April. I will be back with other videos about my time at PAX East, and I hope to like and subscribe to the channel. Well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get more of these happy fun videos in your feed, as well as automatic in the streams of the video games that I the live stream over on Twitch. And I have a feeling I'll be giving this one a go when it's available to the general public to play around with it, because it looks very interesting and the graphics looks amazing. I mean, the screenshots are composed, but they did say they don't do any touch-ups on things afterwards, so we'll see how it goes. So again, you know the drill. If you can't be good at it, and I hope to see you in the funny pages soon.